The Energy Minister, Pat Rabbitte, will announce changes to the tax regime on the oil and gas industry, based, we're told, on recommendations from a firm of international energy consultants. We asked to speak to the Minister, but we're told he's not available. Eddie Hobbs, editor of the recently published Own Our Oil, is, and his view... good morning and welcome, Eddie Hobbs, but your view summarised handily enough by the blurb, which said, and I quote, "The Irish establishment, much like the Norwegians in the 1960s, is industry captive, callow and unambitious, surrendering Ireland's potentially massive offshore hydrocarbons for a handful of coloured beans." So what, ideally, should the Minister announce to satisfy you?
Well, we consulted with Woodmac, who were doing the review, Cathal, and what we said, which is consistent with what's in the book, is that you cannot recover the economic rents, in other words, the super profits potentially that are out there that are owned by the citizens, unless you go above the line. At the moment, we're taxing below the line. We're going after with corporation tax and surcharge tax. What you've got to do, and that you can have it all taken away from you through profit shifting. What you've got to do is apply production sharing agreements. In other words, you get a slice of what's coming out, and royalties. And the irony is that Ireland financed the regime that Uganda introduced in 2007. We paid for it. And the Ugandans, who are also a frontier location, almost precisely the same as we are, on the edge of the next wave, have production sharing included, they have royalties, and they have corporation tax. Now, I think what will happen today is that the Minister will announce an increase in the surcharge tax that goes on to corporation tax. In other words, they're going after the tax again, rather than suspending the licensing round, which is what we suggested, until we bring in production sharing.
Now, the one flaw in your case, as put indeed by the Minister sitting in that very chair a couple of weeks ago when he was talking about this review, is that if the terms are so soft, the oil companies and gas exploration companies will be queuing up to get involved in drilling off our coast. In fact, there's only one drilling round scheduled to begin this year off our coast.
Well, he's right. I mean, but it is a bogus argument, and this is
Why?
It's bogus because what has been suggested is that we must give away the ownership of our offshore oil and gas to these international multinational companies in order to try and get it back at international prices if they ever strike anything out there.
But if the terms are so soft, how come they're not all at it?
Well, that's precisely the point. Before the terms were made soft in 1987, when Ray Burke became Minister for Energy, before that we had production sharing, we had royalties, we had tax, and we had double the rate of drilling up until 1987, since 1987, according to the data that's on the department's site itself. So it's not a question of taxation. The problem, which they won't admit to, the problem that that private capital has in drilling off Ireland is the uncertainty around the whole regime, and particularly planning. They keep citing Corrib. Throughout the world, and Ireland is the second cheapest pricing regime for offshore oil and gas globally. Throughout the world, it's not a function of the tax, it's a function of the uncertainty in terms of the regime and whether there's oil and gas out there. Now, our position is, what we need to do is we need to reposition ourselves to have production sharing and royalties, to bring certainty to private capital that's been at risk by completely revolutionising the planning process.
By revolutionising
the planning process.
Yeah, how?
Well, what we're suggesting is a one-stop shop overseen by a High Court judge that deals with all aspects of planning around offshore oil and gas, to avoid the disaster we've had so far, and that will de-risk it. We're also saying quite clearly, and this is not any original thinking, it's straight out of the template from Norway, is that we establish a national oil exploration company that owns the resource, and that there is a knowledge transfer by doing PPPs between our national oil exploration company and private industry over the next number of decades to get it right.
All right. I'm still puzzled by this notion that if you tax them more, they'll drill more.
No, but what we're saying...
It seems counterintuitive, to use a polite word.
Yeah, well, what we're saying is, if you want to talk about counterintuitive taxation, if we increased corporation tax on offshore oil and gas to 100%, we'd still get nothing, even if there's a gusher. When all of the revenues come on shore finally in Corrib, we will get nothing as a people. Nothing. So it doesn't matter what the nominal rate of corporation tax is. What you've got to do is plan for industry properly, which is what we're not doing. And what we're doing today will be an incremental move forward in the taxation argument, but it won't solve the problem.
Well, we'll see that announcement to be made by Pat Rabbitte later today. Eddie Hobbs, thank you very much.